Pastor with no answers, listeners, what is up? I said, what's up? Hello, listeners. I've lost my daggum mind. Hey, I want to welcome Sean Summers to the Pastor with No Answers Patreon community. You can go to patreon.com/PWNA pod, PWNA pod, to check out what that's all about. But we are happy to have you part of the community and to include you in on some of the behind the scenes discussions. I also want to tell you guys about Agape flashcards. Have some of these bad boys in my hand right now. And basically they are small. You can hold them in the palm of your hand. Really well done flashcards of scriptures. Our listenership, we represent all sorts of different ways of approaching the Bible, and I mean different ways that Christians approach the Bible, but one thing we pretty much agree on is there's some really good, helpful, encouraging, uplifting stuff. These cards are broken down into faith scriptures, personal discipline scriptures, promise scriptures, kingdom scriptures, healing scriptures, and they're actually really good for adults, but I would say if you have kids and you want them to get acclimated to some cool stuff in the Bible, you could use them for those guys as well. Really cool is that 10% of all the profits go to organizations fighting against human trafficking, including Exodus Road, the Network, and the Child Rescue Initiative. You can go to agapeflashcards.com, check these things out, or just make your life simple and type in amazon.com and find them there. Really cool stuff. Looking forward to you guys enjoying this show, so let's not wait anymore. Thank you guys for listening. Peace out. Hey, we were talking, on a recent episode, I think, where, Natalie, I was telling you just how I really am sensitive towards LGBTQ community as far as the terminology to use. Well, I guess I say that I'm sensitive towards it, but I'm also going to say I feel pretty uneducated, so maybe that's my fault, and maybe that means I'm not sensitive toward it. But at the very least, I can say I would never have the attitude of, I don't care, I'm not going to learn all your terminologies, you need to just be okay with that, and blah, 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 blah. But I am kind of lost, and I to the point where you were calling me like a Southern boy, and I mean I just call people man. Like I tweeted someone. I'm pretty sure he is, he calls himself queer and he, him stuff that I don't get, and I was kind of like giving him some dap, online, basically saying, man, that was really cool, man. And he blasted me, said, like, how can you assume that, first of all, don't call me man, and all this stuff. So I seriously want to know, and then I've got some other questions for y'all, but what is someone trying to convey? And I'm going on the record as stupid. I know people are like, how can Joey not know this? But when people have on like their Twitter profile, he, him, she, her, I don't know what they're trying to say. I don't get it.
I would like to start this off with a disclaimer.
Joey really is a good guy.
Well, no, not even that. Obviously, like, the fact that you're asking this question means you care, right? Which is like a huge thing, right? Disclaimer from myself, I am not the voice of the LGBTQ community, and my opinion is my own from my own experience with the community and with the online community as well. I think a lot of it has to do with, from what I understand, a lot of it has to do with like trans awareness, right? So for a long period of time, trans people were kind of like erased and or not like considered as people because they were for a long time like referred to as it, right? And people were not sensitive to the idea of like not only trans sexual people but transgender people who may, or even like non-gender binary people who don't ascribe to one or the other but rather both or neither, which is like a whole conversation with regards to like the idea of identity and gender versus like sexual orientation versus like a person's bits, right? Because they are not all mutually exclusive. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is trans, and, or rather, they're trans and they're like non-binary. But I think a chunk of it is like, even if you, so like, I don't believe that gender is like a real thing. I think it's just a construct that people make up to make life easier for themselves. Sexuality is a real thing. I think, like, a person's sex is a real thing because you're born with bits or you're not, or you're born with like maybe bits that belong to both or
so
whatever.
You're distinguishing sex from gender.
From gender.
Two different things. We'll have to talk about that another time. I got a lot of questions about that.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But to me, gender is just like an idea. So I was telling this person, my friend, that I don't understand why they feel the need to like identify as non-binary when like gender doesn't exist at all, really. And they were saying that like for most of the world, that's not how people think. They think you are either a male or a female. When you don't think about like gender as being a thing, then it changes the game. Like for myself, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, they identify as them, because they either identify as neither he or she, or as both, like somewhere in the middle. And because of that, they want to be referred to as they or them, because there's a lot of connotations with calling someone who was born a woman but no longer identifies as a woman, she. Right? Like, their experience is very different. They see themselves as very different. A lot of times it comes with things like body dysmorphia, which is hard enough to deal with. So when you're walking... Dysmorphia, which means like...
Yeah, if I don't know the he, her thing, you know I don't know what dysmorphia means.
So listen, body dysmorphia is when you see yourself, like if I was to say, and this might get a little, whatever. I see myself, obviously, like I am a voluptuous person, I have curves, I have bits, but in my brain, I don't see myself as very feminine. I see myself as like more masculine. Then me seeing myself in a feminine body causes a lot of like dissonance between like who I am as a physical person and how I feel I carry myself.
And is that societal? Like that's
a thing.
Yeah.
That people go through a lot. And like a lot of times trans people start with like, not a lot of times, there are trans people who can suffer from body dysmorphia, and it's not always sexual either. I think there's a lot to say when it comes to like people in the eating disorder camp, where they feel like they are like huge, but they're actually like not. Like, you just see yourself in a different light than you actually are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can be tied to, like, a ton of things. But when people when people are specific as far as, like, these are my pronouns, right? So, like, I identify as she, her, right? But that says nothing about my sexuality. That just says about my gender and how I identify myself. Other people know to call me she, her. I do not have a thing where I want to be called they, them. I have nothing like that. I'm not a trans person. But the fact that if I was to put that on like my bio, for example, on social media, it like highlights that like I am aware of the trans person's plight and want to contribute to that conversation.
Yeah, I like how you put that. John, would you consider yourself pretty up with all the lingo? Like,
I hope so. I feel like I'm pretty hip to the game. As a white passing man, so I'm half Mexican, and so like as a white passing man, I understand just how much privilege I've been given in the world, and so I understand and try to be extra sensitive to people's wishes and wants of how they want to be treated. And then also try to have as little opinions as I can, just cool, in the whole thing. Because like cool. I just don't know. And so like if someone wants to be called they or them or he, she, whatever they want to be called, I'll call them. You know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so that's where I sit with the whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean I say this sincerely. Like part of the reason why I wanted you guys to have a voice on this show is I actually have learned from you guys. John, I don't know if you remember, and I don't even remember what the context was, but I mean, you very gently called me out on something as a friend. It wasn't like this crazy back and forth something on Facebook, but I was like, dang, that really does make a lot of sense. I'm glad John said that, because that kind of clues me in, and then also gives me an opportunity to kind of retrack and back up a little bit. And Natalie, you know the stuff that I've learned from you. I remember in our house church, I remember asking all of us, because a lot of the anger, some of the anger had to do with people in the group that were very angry at how evangelicals got Trump into office, and having very evangelical families, and the evangelical families not understanding why their daughter or their son wasn't a Trump supporter. And I asked you guys, I said, what would y'all do if someone walked into our house church and had a Make America Great Again t-shirt and was a Trump supporter? And I'll be honest, I don't think people liked that question at all. Do y'all remember that? Do y'all remember that? I really felt like people were like, well, I don't want to start a big argument, but we wouldn't like it. We probably would say something, but I don't think people really answered. But
what's crazy is I think about that all of the time.
Yeah.
Because moving back to Tampa, Artie's being watched a lot of the time by my grandparents.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, for those of you that don't know, I'm Puerto Rican, but I'm definitely, like, I would say I'm white passing.
See, y'all taught me a new terminology, so that's a thing to say, white passing.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you can pass as a white person,
you get treated differently.
So, like, I'm very, very light-skinned, so I don't have the same plight that, like, a lot of my family does.
Yep.
All to say, my grandfather is a very big, very dark-skinned man. He is an indigenous man, okay? I walk into this man's house 3 times out of the week to drop off my daughter so they can watch her. And he has 2 Trump hats sitting on his counter at all times. And it literally reminds me of, like, that conversation so many times. Because I have learned that people are more than their political association.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have depth. But wow, is it hard not to get upset every time I see them, man.
The most upsetting thing for me is, and it actually does, I understand that this isn't necessarily enough. I get it. But it actually does mean something to me when someone a Trump supporter will actually acknowledge, I think that guy is extremely inappropriate. I think he says things that he shouldn't say. He's definitely not my Christian like, that actually means something, because what is just so maddening is when people literally have him on the throne of Christianity, like the answer to prayer for this country. And I'm like, you're the same people that were just crucifying Bill Clinton. Like, for... I mean, I can't. I don't even know what to say about it. I don't even know. But I wanted to ask y'all though. Y'all, I mean, please tell me, and I still love and respect you if you don't. But please tell me that you,
good start.
Please tell me that you call BS on people pissed at Vince Vaughn for shaking Trump's hand. People pissed at Ellen DeGeneres for being a friend with George Bush. I mean, that's just too much for me. I'm like. Because I like what you said, Natalie. You were just like, people are more than their political affiliation. And that, to me, especially when Christians act like that, I'm like, you missed the point. Mm-hmm. You have totally missed the point. Because the sort of people that Jesus welcomed, including the Pharisees that probably would have been ardent Trump supporters, he was chill with all of them. I mean... Y'all, the look on your face, Natalie, I'm thinking maybe that you like the fact that people are pissed at Vince Vaughn. Did you want Vince Vaughn to spit in Trump's face or something?
Here's the thing. I stand by what I said, man. I stand by the idea that, like, people are complex and, you know, we are more than what we claim to believe.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important that, like, in those particular, like, examples, those are not real people to me. And that sounds awful.
Vince Vaughn and Trump, not real people? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is, like, I can speculate all I want. I don't know them. They are nothing to me. So what they decide to do is entirely on them. Same with, like, Ellen DeGeneres and Bush. It's like, listen, you very well could have that depth. But at the end of the day, you guys make a shit ton of money, and you're lizard people.
You're what people?
You know what I mean? You're lizard people. You're not a real person.
Yeah. So you see Joey Svensson. For some reason, I was at the national championship game, and I got to sit behind Trump, and you see me being chums with Donald Trump. Like, do you think, dang it, I thought I knew Joey better than that?
That's a whole other conversation, because I do know you.
Right.
And you are a person to me in my life that I communicate with on a daily basis.
Right.
Trump is a personality.
Yeah.
I don't know him and his intricacies. Same with Vince Vaughn. Same with Ellen DeGeneres. But that's just like how I view that public spectrum of people. Mm-hmm. Because I will never presume to know them. Because I don't. They exist and they have a lot of influence in my life, even though I don't know them. And that to me is scary.
Yeah.
But aside from that, no.
I think what's interesting and dangerous is both outrage culture and cancel culture, which kind of go hand in hand.
Trash.
Right? Like
what's cancel culture, you said?
Yeah, so outrage culture and cancel culture, like when people get super upset and go on social media tirades about Vince Vaughn shaking hands with Trump, I'm in that camp. Like, I don't care, honestly.
Right.
I'm still going to watch Vince Vaughn movies, still think he's hilarious. I still love Ellen DeGeneres and her dancing shoes. Like, it's all fine. They're entertainers to me. But what's problematic is, like, this big blown up thing, and we get outraged about these trivial, in my opinion, trivial things. Somebody's shaking someone else's hand. That's not an endorsement. That doesn't mean that he voted for him or he's gonna vote for him. It doesn't mean anything. But we blow all of this stuff up, and in that blow up of outrage, we lose a lot of the focus on things that matter and the things that are important. I think, right? So like, and it happens a lot in the political realm, but also in social realm. And what we do is we get super upset and then we cancel Vince Vaughn. I'm boycotting Vince Vaughn. I'm never watching any of his movies again. It's crazy town. It's absolutely crazy town. And frankly, we are like ruining people's lives completely prematurely. It's a court of public guilt or innocence, and we're canceling people and ruining these entertainers' careers because they like didn't turn their back on Trump, and you know what I mean? Right. It's crazy.
With regards to cancel culture, which is like a whole thing, there's actually a really good video of this person. I think their name on YouTube is like ContraPoints, but they have a whole thing on cancel culture and how toxic it is and how problematic it is, because people's lives do get ruined. And like a lot of times people cancel like big named people because they feel like, I think somewhere deep in their subconscious they know that, you know, they, regardless of what they choose to do, that person's gonna be fine. You know what I mean? But the problem is whenever you like quote unquote cancel someone who's like, I don't know, a school teacher, right, who makes a bad tweet, and that person gets like fired over like something that, like, there's no room for nuance, there's no room for anything. You step a toe out of line, you canceled, and that's crazy town. I agree with Josh.
Yeah, right. And so I'm very, very progressive person just in general, and identify as a brown person and like all of those things. that I just saw just this week an article about there's a University of South Carolina student who posted something and used the N-word on her post on Martin Luther King Day, which is
big
crazy disrespectful, completely over the line. But this girl's 18 to 22 maybe, right? She immediately was expelled from school, all of her everything, job fired, like in a day, 24 hours, for making what I would hope would be a really, really awful mistake. But that's what I'm talking about with cancel culture, is like there's no room for growth or learning. When we're canceling everybody, there's no opportunity for redemption. There's no opportunity for them to be, oh, my bad, you're right, I'm gonna
she
be
did a
better.
Stupid thing.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Like, someone needs to tell her, hey, maybe don't do that stupid thing, and here's why, as opposed to like, and I'm never talking to you again.
Right. That's not helpful.
It's so crazy that the sort of stuff that y'all are saying is so timely, because the interview that is forthcoming on this episode, I actually got pretty nervous about it, and you guys are helping me feel less nervous. So y'all probably aren't, y'all maybe heard of it, but I grew up with a show called Dukes of Hazzard. Mm-hmm. So it is.
We know about them Dukes of Hazzard.
Okay, I didn't know. I taught 7th grade in 2000, and people didn't know the Flintstones, so I never assumed that people know stuff.
Boomerang is a thing. We know the Flintstones.
So basically, John Schneider, he is Bo Duke, and I think this guy is extremely impressive person, just what he's accomplished. Just talking to him, I'm like, man, this guy has learned a lot, done a lot in life, get a lot about what he says, and I am going to go on the record to say I think he's a good guy, and I don't think he is a racist. We got in a conversation, and I personally think that he said some things that I would say I disagree with and I think is wrong, but I don't think saying something wrong makes you a racist. I think it makes you someone that may need to learn more, or may have said something and was misunderstood. But I think that's, and I never knew that it was called cancel culture, but that's what it is. It's like somebody says something wrong, write them off as a racist. But I will say this. So when people will hear this, and people will hear me push back a little bit, and then I realize, you know what, I just don't want to make a big thing out of this, but listen to what I did. I was like, let's talk about Tyler Perry, because him and Tyler Perry are friends. And so I immediately wanted to be like, let's let our listeners know this guy is in with Tyler Perry. But I just got a little bit nervous, and that's what I don't like. And John, I want to be more like you, and Natalie, I think you're probably the same way, as just being less concerned. And I'm making some pretty big strides, but just being less concerned about what people think about me. But I hate the fact that I have to feel so careful, and I do think that the whole society is turning into something like that. It's like everybody has to be super careful because they don't want to be canceled. They don't want to be written off.
I think that is fair. But I definitely also think, and I haven't heard the interview,
right,
and I don't know that guy, obviously, but I definitely think there's something to be said when, like, you are automatically on the defensive about a person saying they're not racist. You know what I mean? And, like, I definitely think cancel culture is trash, and I think there needs to be room for growth and, like, for explanation. But if the concern is that you're concerned that people are probably going to think this person is racist due to their remarks, is a giant red flag for me.
Sure. Well, let's get into this a little bit. So here's what it is. He basically makes a comment that, in my opinion, isn't giving African Americans enough credit for what they have to walk through. In all fairness, I do think that is what John called me out on Facebook for, again, in a very friendship-oriented way, but along the lines of, that's kind of easy for you to say, Joey. I would say that we all probably struggle with a hint of racism or prejudice or something, but I'll go on the record to say I really don't consider myself a racist by any means, but I said something wrong, and John called me out on it. So that is the context of this. Is this is a guy that is buddies with Tyler Perry, buddies with a lot of black people, but I think because he's so comfortable, he's kind of like, everybody has equal opportunity. Everybody's, and just, you know what I'm saying? Like, kind of like not giving credit where credit is due, as far as there is real privilege. So I think someone can have a lack of appreciation for privilege and it be ignorance, maybe,
totally,
and not racism.
I completely agree. And as the guy that did the calling out, I've had those thoughts too, because I've again walked through life as a white passing male. Like, everybody's treated me with gotten privilege. I continue to get privilege everywhere that I go, right? And I've had those arguments about black and brown people having to say everybody has access to college, everybody has this and that and the other thing, and it was coming from you're right, a place of ignorance, not a place of malice. However, I think the problem comes when people aren't open-minded to hear about and to talk through those mechanisms that are in our society that make privilege. So like that's kind of where I find a rub, and what I find problematic are people in my life that are like, white privilege isn't a thing, period, and all of your arguments that say that it is are bogus. And I'm like, well, that's not helpful or constructive. But so that's my and I don't think that ignorance equals racism. I don't think ignorance equals this person's a racist. I'm completely in agreement with you. But again, there's a line, or there's a place where people push back on learning more and getting better and growing, and that I find offensive, and that I find to be super problematic.
Yeah. Well, it'll be really interesting. I don't know if we will get back on here and actually, well, maybe you guys remind me, because I would love for y'all to listen to this interview and tell me what you think. It'll be interesting. Like I'll be curious if one of y'all is like, I can't believe he said that. But I mean, like I said, I go on the record to think, I think this guy's great. I don't think he's a racist at all. I think he sees the world through different lenses, and I think we all see things accurately and we all see things inaccurately. We don't have our stuff together, and that's just kind of where I sit with all of this.
I think to that point, yeah, man, it's silly to think that everyone has their shit together, right? It's silly to think that everyone has the answers, and that everyone's careful, and that everyone is sensitive to everyone else's plate. And I'll give the guy this. He's an older gentleman, naturally, right? So, like, if it was a younger person, I would say, hey, man, you have the internet, you have resources, and if you, like, you care, Joey, like, you're asking people about these things, you have this podcast, you have a genuine curiosity to, like, the human condition, you know what I mean? So you're going to seek out, like, to understand. So that's, I mean, and I'm not saying that that's too much to ask from, like, an older person, but I think that is where a lot of this, like, weird ambiguity comes into play, is, like, sure, you may be an ignorant person, but, like, do you seek to understand, or are you living blatantly in this ignorance? Yeah. And I think a lot of that becomes difficult because, like, people will say, like, oh, well, I'm friends with Tyler Perry, or I have a lot of, like, African American friends, so, like, naturally I'm not a racist.
And I'm saying that, not him, just going.
I know, I get that, yeah. Right. But, like, that's not how that works. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. That being said, I'm really excited to listen to it.
We are here with John Schneider, and I'm going to try not to go overboard, John, but if someone would have told my 7-year-old if someone would have told my 7-year-old version that I would one day be able to talk to Bo Duke about the Dukes of Hazzard, I would have said I don't need anything else in life, no wife, kids, shelter.
I understand that. I understand that because later on in my life, I became really good friends with Burt Reynolds, and had part of this is in the book. But had somebody told me when I was climbing over a fence and sneaking onto the set of Smokey and the Bandit in 1976, that 40 years later or 35 years later, I'd be sitting with Burt in his living room drinking beer, watching football, I'd say, you're out of your mind.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That really is. So I want to talk about all the things you've done and are doing. My gosh, it's ridiculous. Author, star on Dukes of Hazzard, Smallville, and currently on Tyler Perry's Have and Have Nots, chart-topping music career. It looks like you started a nonprofit, and my gosh, an apple pie moonshine CBD oil. So it's crazy, but at some point, can
CBoD oil.
Yep. I was gonna get for sure.
Why not?
For sure.
Why not?
So at some point, can I get into some Dukes of Hazzard
Absolutely.
questions? You okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. So, I wanted to, your life is obviously a unique journey. I mean, just the stuff that you've done, the stuff that you're still doing. Was there like a point in your life, as a young guy where you were just saying, you thought to yourself, you know what, I'm not playing by the rules, not going to do things how most people do things. My life is just going to be different.
Well, I never really was a rule. I'm not a rule breaker. I try to walk in the crosswalk and I pick up trash when I see it. But as far as theater and music and getting myself out there, and the reports I wrote when I was in middle school and term papers I did, they were all unusual. They were all so unusual that it was something I heard from many teachers over many, high school seems like such a long time. I was only there for 3 years. I got out a year early, but I heard from a lot of people.
Where'd you grow up?
What's that?
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Mount Kisco, New York. And then, but I did go to high school in outside of Atlanta. My mother worked for IBM and got transferred.
Gotcha.
But it was normal for me to hear from teachers, well, this isn't exactly the way we wanted it to be done, but this is so interesting, we're going to let it slide.
That is pretty cool. So you heard that more than once, eh?
I heard that a lot, and I still hear it. We do, Alicia and I do movies, we do music, we do all kinds of things. And what I hear mostly is, this is so much fun. How come nobody else knows that this isn't supposed to be an arduous task, making a movie or making a record or doing a sound check? How come so many people just pull their hair out and either pretend that this is hard work, which it's not, or just want to believe that they're doing something that is insanely difficult. Yeah. And because we have fun, but we also take what we do very seriously. But there's a difference between people just with their I think it's ego that makes people want to project that something is hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like when it's almost like a badge of honor if you ask someone, how things going? Everybody likes to say, "Oh man, busy."
I just can't wait till Friday. Then change your job, man.
Exactly. If you're going to lead with busy, maybe there's something that you need to rethink if that's the first thing that comes to mind, for sure. I, with what you just said, though, I really, this may sound like a childish question, but is acting like the funnest thing ever? Like sometimes I'll watch actors and actresses and I'm like, man, that's got to be the most fun
it's the
job
easiest
ever.
Thing. It's the easiest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're wearing somebody else's clothes, saying somebody else's words, standing in somebody else's light. And that's why it really drives me crazy when actors are I don't know if they're given or they just take some monstrous public stance as if they have any idea what reality is. And by they, I guess I mean we, except, I do dig my own post holes, which I think is important. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun, but it's with all the other stuff with the, I like to say when you're making a movie, or you're doing a record, your vocal is a piece of the puzzle. Your role, your character, whoever you're playing, is a piece of the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle that I used to do with my grandmother. We used to love to do puzzles.
Right.
And that picture is always in my head, and I think, so how can a piece of the front bumper of a 69 Charger in a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle think it's more important than any other piece in the puzzle? Because it's, unless it's the last piece, which somehow seems more important because then, you're finished. But no one piece is more important than any other piece. However,
that's pretty awesome.
In writing and directing, we're doing a Smokey and the Bandit tribute film starting the end of February. We're doing a movie called Stand on It, and I'm like 2 scenes from being finished writing the script, and I know we're doing the movie at the end of February. So I love that. But when you start with a blank piece of paper or a blank screen and an idea, now that's pretty special. Somebody who designs the puzzle, who then color corrects the puzzle and decides if there's going to be 1,000 or 1,200 or 500 pieces. Now that job, that carries with it a little more weight.
Right.
And not to say it's harder, but for me, it's more enjoyable. And then I take that hat off, which I will today. That script on my calendar, it says finish stand on it today. So I will. Then my director hat goes on. Then we're into casting and location scouting and figuring out where we're going to bring the writer's vision to reality, or what we loosely call reality. And that too carries a lot of weight, but it's fun. It's not like, oh man, now I've got to be the director.
Right.
So when I bump into actors who say, oh yeah, I got to do 8 shows a week on Broadway. Well, 8 shows a week, that's 16 hours a week. Shut up. I mean, my God.
So true.
My God.
So
yeah.
true.
Go cut a cord of firewood and then talk to me about what's hard.
That's exactly right. I mean, totally. So
go do your own
you
podcast,
wrote a book.
Then I'll show you what's hard.
Yeah, there you go.
And promote it, right? I mean, you got to get people to hear your stuff. You had to have had the vision to do it in the first place. You have to know what you want it to be about and what the tone needs to be. And then you get in touch with different pieces of the puzzle. And I'm one of the pieces of your puzzle.
Right, totally. So, I mean, there's so many people that they want to direct movies. I know some people personally who have written whole movie scripts and everything, and I'm sure that is a very common thing, and I'm also sure that the vast majority of them never go anywhere just because there's so many. Like, was your foot in the door just basically your like Dukes of Hazzard? I mean, no one's going to talk to Bo Duke and just dismiss any idea that you've come up with. I mean, was that helpful once you had that role? In
the Directors Guild, my foot in the door was Dukes, because when you're a regular on a show, I don't know if it's still the case, but then when you were a regular on the show, you could skip over a lot of interning and a lot of things you needed to do in order to become a member of the Directors Guild. So back in 1984, I became a member of the Directors Guild. Back in 1981, I became a member of the Writers Guild because I wrote on the John Schneider Back Home special that I did way back when. So I knew instinctively, that I was in a position where I could force a couple of things. But when we did Dukes of Hazzard, I had already been doing theater for 10 years. I started at 8 years old. So I was doing theater and magic and playing my guitar and learning to juggle and hair and makeup and lighting. I mean, all that, everything you could imagine.
Writing kick-ass essays in school.
Yeah, writing kick-ass, albeit unusual essays in school. But I had and still do, I have a voracious appetite to learn how to do what we do better.
Right.
And one thing I learned early on, because now if we go back into time here, when Dukes of Hazzard was on, we started filming in 1978. So when we were filming, the men and women who wrote and directed Dukes of Hazzard were already 50. So they had been born in the teens or 20s. Some of them were 60 or 70. So some had been born before the turn of the century. But they had been alive when vaudeville was king. They had been alive when radio was the golden age of radio. And this is the most important thing, they'd been alive when radio turned into television with Dragnet and Gunsmoke and The Saint and Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, and Wanted Dead or Alive, and all these things that were radio shows needed directors. So they really invented how to direct for television. So imagine me, an 18-year-old sponge who'd already made 15 or 20 Super 8 movies with my little camera, who'd already done probably 18 musicals or dramas, been on stage. So I'm watching these men and women and just soaking it all up. So when I decided I wanted to force my hand because I could and become a member of the Directors Guild, it wasn't because I had a casual interest. I don't have a casual interest in anything. Yeah. I'm either interested or not. And so I went for it. And now that Alicia and I we've made 10 movies in 5 years.
Good Lord.
So, and recorded 106 songs, released over 50 singles. I mean, we go for it.
Now, is that part of, like, would you say that a lot of your professional career is also leisure and stuff you like to do? Because I'm thinking, like, when do you get away and relax?
No, there is it's the old saying, if you love your work, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, if you looked at what I do, you would say all I do is work. But I find my work. Occasionally we'll play golf. We used to play more golf, but we've been with music coming back into my life, and with the book, and with the advertising of the CBoD oil, and I mean all this stuff. There really is no time for anything other than singing, writing, directing, all the stuff that I love to do. Yeah. But I would not call any of it difficult, and I would also not call any of it leisure.
Right. Yeah.
I just call it necessary.
Yeah, totally. So I love it. Like, how did you become Bo Duke? Like, what was the process? Were there like 100 nice looking blonde headed dudes, going for this? Probably 1,000. 1,000.
Because they went to New York, they went to Dallas, they were all over Los Angeles, and then finally they went to Atlanta. But well, first of all, folks who are listening, if you want to know the whole story, get my book, John Schneider. It's called My Life, My Way. And now that you're hearing me talk, I think you'll know why I called it that, because it's my life, my way.
And let me say something to our listeners real quick. Everything that we talk about will be in the show notes. So the CBoD oil, John Schneider's book, his latest record release, his website. So everything will be in the show notes.
Excellent.
All right, go ahead, John.
Well, I was in Atlanta, and I had just gotten out of high school the year before, and that's important to note, because high school I felt was in my way, kind of a necessary evil, because I was doing theater at night, was doing theater during the day. Had a wonderful deal with my principal in the Board of Education, where I could go and perform in a traveling show for other high schools, actually, and get a music credit, an English credit, and a foreign language credit, and not have to be in school in the morning. So again, that's part and party to my teachers, in this case, my principal, going, we don't normally do this, but we're going to do this. I'm going to make this work for you, because this needs to happen. So I did that, but I also went to summer school my 10th grade year and my 11th grade year, so I could graduate early. So I actually graduated when I got out of my second term of summer school. So all that to say that, had I still been in high school when I heard about the auditions for Dukes of Hazzard, I wouldn't have been able to go. So I listened to that voice in my head that said, look, dude, if you're serious about this, you got to get out of high school. And in order to do that, you've got to give up 2 summers. So I did. So when I heard about the auditions for Dukes, I heard about it through my agent. I had an agent. Had several. In those days, you could have several agents. It was non-exclusive. And I auditioned that same week in Atlanta for a movie with Robert Duvall called The Great Santini, to play his son, but I'm about a foot taller than him, so that wasn't going to work out. They saw me to replace John Travolta in Welcome Back, Kotter. You're probably not old enough to remember that he left that show, and they brought in a Southerner, right?
Oh my God. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Stephen Shortridge, I think, was his name. And I auditioned for the Dukes of Hazzard. Now, for the Dukes of Hazzard, it is true that I'd heard they were looking for people 24 to 30 from rural Georgia with no experience. They were not looking for actors. Now, I was 18 from Westchester County, New York. I just happened to be living in Atlanta. So I went in. I had my agent tell them that I was 24 from Snailville, Georgia. And this was a perfect time for me because I had just graduated first in my class at the Georgia School of High Performance Driving, which didn't exist. But there was no internet. You couldn't check it. You couldn't check my age. You couldn't check you couldn't fact check any of that. So
this is awesome.
I went in with because I had heard about an actor in town who had come in for an audition and the script called for him to spit. He's chewing and spitting. So he's chewing tobacco and spitting. Right. So he came into the audition and he chewed and he spit on the floor, on the carpet of this. This was a urban legend that actually was true. And the reason why is he had said at that point, he said, you want to walk out of an audition having made an impression. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it's good or bad.
Right.
But be unforgettable. So I went to this audition and it was in the Omni International Hotel, which was a very posh hotel in downtown Atlanta, where I happened to be working doing a music cabaret show called Manhattan Yellow Pages. So I was working in the building, and I went in with a 6-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon, and I sat down on the couch in the secretary's waiting room, put my feet up on the table, and opened a beer. Yep, and I gave,
unforgettable
from that point, and I carried my 6-pack into the other room for the audition. And
that is badass, man.
Yeah, and that was the first audition. Second audition, I brought the beer back in my but I left it out in the lobby. And then after that, I got you do the first audition, then you get a callback audition, which is the second one. And then if you survive that, in those days, I don't know if it still works. Now you probably just film yourself on your cell phone. But they called me, and what's funny about this is when the phone would ring at home, I was living with my mom. I was in high school. I would say, if that's Warner Brothers, tell them I'm busy. Well, the phone rang, and it was Warner Brothers, and I had a screen test. They sent me a round trip ticket on Delta, first class, $300 from Atlanta to Los Angeles, and I got the screen test. So my life changed. Although I was supposed to be there for 4 days, I was there for almost 5 weeks, reading with different people, rehearsing with different people every Wednesday, Thursday, and then reading for the network on Friday, because they were trying to get the right combination of Bo, Luke, and Daisy. Yeah. And they did not get the right combination. Dennis Quaid was in there, and Lorenzo Lamas was in there, and a bunch of...
Dennis Quaid? Wow.
Yeah, he was in the mix, and a bunch of people were in the mix. But it didn't look, feel, or smell right until they brought Tom Wopat in from New York. He was doing a show on Broadway, and they brought him in, and there was a chemistry, and still is. There's a friendship that's palpable between Wopat and Schneider that just was there from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And
which I'm sure helps.
I found out on a Saturday that I had it. I said, I had it.
Yeah.
You're going home. I said, okay, but did I get it? Or, because in my soul, I knew I got it because somehow I knew that role had been written for me. And
Right.
my agent said, "Yep, you got it. You're going to be filming back in 20 miles from where you live in Georgia next week."
Oh my
So-
gosh. Is
so-
it on the table to ask like what a star of a hit television show made back then? And that did it start in the late
initial
70s
deal
or early
memo,
80s?
it seemed like millions of dollars. It was $1,400 an episode.
Wow.
Yep, and we shot
how-
for 12 days. Now per diem for if you go on location and shoot something, I think per diem is $100 a day. So if I worked for 14 days, I would get that without having a salary.
Right. All right.
Yep. So the world's changed.
Yeah, for sure. So as a kid, I remember being out with my brother and my parents on a Friday night, and obviously there was no, we didn't even have a VCR yet to record stuff.
No, they
And
were
so
expensive. They were like $1,500.
Right. So it was priority to get back to watch the Dukes of Hazzard. So for me, it was like seriously one of the biggest things in my life as a kid. How like now as an adult, I don't know how to gauge like how big was the show? Like,
oh, it was number one.
It
was top five all the time.
Gosh, yeah.
So we averaged 28 million people a week over our 7 years that watched the Dukes of Hazzard.
Wow.
Average.
And that's crazy. As an adult too, I thought about, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, and so I'm sure there's maybe some other shows that pulled this off too, but I thought how unique the Dukes of Hazzard was in that the cops were the bad guys, and it was appropriate for all ages. So it wasn't like a bad thing, but it was like the good guys were truly the rebels that the bad guy cops were always after. I thought that was so awesome.
It was Robin Hood.
Yeah.
It was Robin Hood and the Sheriff of Nottingham. Yeah. It was great. And really,
so were you guys,
the bad
were you guys
were
off?
not
I'm
that
sorry.
bad, and the good guys were not that good.
Right.
Right. We had our cracks, we had our flaws, and our bad guys. And we did this in Christmas Cars. We just had a movie that did really well for us. Christmas Cars was out on our streaming service. We have a streaming service called Cineflix, DOD, and we also sold the DVD through John Schneider Studios. But I played a guy who was a good guy with flaws, and our bad guys had a conscience. It's important that your bad guy has a conscience. And Dukes of Hazzard was watched and still watched by entire families, from 2-year-olds to 90-year-olds. And people will say, well, Knight Rider was a popular show too. Yeah, but there were no adults watching Knight Rider.
Right.
Kids were watching Knight Rider. Adults were watching Dukes of Hazzard with their children. We were truly an entire family experience. I think the A-Team might have been that too. Because of George Peppard.
Yeah, I think so.
George Peppard was like our Denver Pyle. It was our reason, or he was A-Team's reason for somebody over 14 to want to watch the show.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was a perfect combination. And I do think, I'm patting myself on the back because I wrote Christmas Cars. I do think we captured that same recipe in Christmas Cars. And from the thousands of reviews that I've gotten on my Facebook page and the YouTube channel, people seem to agree, except for about 3 of them, and I just deleted them. Because I can do that now.
There you
I
go.
can ban users, baby. Ban you.
Absolutely. How close? I love it. How close were all of you? Like, I mean, was there ever a romantic relationship?
No. That's because Tom and I
had
had both done theater, and we knew better. You don't do that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But we were very close, very like cousins.
Boss Hogg, Cooter, Roscoe, all of y'all were pretty good buddies.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, great folks. Oh, and by the way, the guy that had spit on the carpet for that audition, that was Sonny Troyer, who played Enos.
Oh,
he was
really?
He was the urban legend. He was the legendary guy who taught us all you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Gosh.
Yep.
Enos,
So I knew
Enos.
I knew him back in '75, and Ben, both of them.
Yeah.
And Byron Terry, who played Coy later when Tom and I didn't come back for a while. Byron Cherry had actually been a friend of mine for 3 years before Dukes.
Right.
Yeah. And he's
right.
in Christmas cars. He's in Christmas cars too.
Yeah. So you guys, I'm assuming, had stuntmen with the crazy General Lee jumps
lots.
and all that
lots
stuff.
Of
did the stuntmen ever get hurt? Like, was there ever like, oh my gosh, I hope they're okay, that doesn't look good?
Oh, it
sort
never
of situations?
looked good. They always landed badly, you know. but no, they were fine. I mean, they'd dislocate a shoulder here and there, and they'd occasionally break a thumb if they had their hands on the steering wheel wrong. But stunt-wise, no, we didn't have any accidents that weren't intentional. We did have an accident, a terrible accident. I talked about it on my YouTube channel, where we'd had rain over the weekend and the road was rutted, and we had a camera truck, which is basically a heavy-duty, a 3/4 ton pickup truck with all kinds of gear on it, rigging on it, and people on it. We had that go over, and someone was killed. It was a very, very bad day for us all, especially for Rodney. But
right.
It's people. If you want to learn more about that, just go to my YouTube channel and look up accident. But yeah, other than that, which was terrible, obviously, for the amount of stunts that we did, it was crazy. It's actually a great testimony to Paul Baxley, who was our stunt coordinator, our second unit director, that even though they did so many stunts, I mean, they do 2 turnovers and a jump before lunch. No one was hurt. So he was amazing. He's gone on as have a lot of people from Dukes, but he was truly amazing.
Yeah. That's cool. So I was thinking about this, and I'll just say this, John. I was actually proud of myself because I went to your Facebook page and I saw where you actually address this. Like, our 2020 is a lot different from the early 1980s. And I remember I had the General Lee. I had figurines of you two. I think I had one of Uncle Jesse. And I mean, I grew up in an area that was pretty diverse. I had a lot of black friends. And at the time, I didn't really even know what the Confederate flag was. I didn't even have a clue. To me, it was just a cool flag.
Well, people still kind of don't.
Yeah.
They still don't.
But today, do you ever get flack for your past role with just how, when you guys honked the horn, it was Dixie and
only
the
online
flag. And
I have that horn on several of my vehicles, and I'll never stop honking it. I do not negotiate with terrorists. I do not give in to revisionist history, and I do not say something just because it's a popular opinion if I don't mean it.
Right.
And I think the notion, because I've had a lot of people say, well, I didn't know what the flag meant. You kind of said it. I didn't know what the flag meant, on the show when I was a kid. Well, that kind of implies that we did, and we slipped one over on people because this flag is the universal sign of racism. Well, it's not. It never was. We address this in Christmas cars too, a lot. I say things like symbols don't hurt people, people hurt people. In fact, my understanding, I've not seen it in print, but I've had several people tell me that the NAACP has actually gone on record online as saying that this flag is not a symbol of racism. So if the NAACP says it, then guess what, folks? It's probably not.
Right.
And I'm from New York.
It wasn't. Yeah. Wasn't there? Didn't you guys have on the show an African American policeman?
We had Sheriff Little.
What?
We had Sheriff Little. We had Dobro in the first episode. We had black folk and white folk and red folk. We had all kinds of folk, and nobody ever pointed out what color anybody was because nobody ever noticed.
Right.
I think what's happened with this whole, I like to say that it's selling division under the guise of equality. The kind of things that Al Sharpton is doing is it's an atrocity. I'm glad I'm going to have a chance to say this. I think if Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, the first thing he would do is go punch Al Sharpton right in the mouth. He has done more to divide black people and white people than any single human being on the planet, other than perhaps Obama. And it's an atrocity, especially that he's peddling his dope to young people who don't know any better. I see people who are now more aware of blacks and whites and browns and Hispanics and, oh my God, there's an Apache. You know, people are now, because they're so afraid to say something like Apache, they're so afraid to offend somebody somewhere that now we're all, except me, obviously, we're all walking on eggshells. And when you walk on eggshells, you're not yourself. Right. So it's very difficult now for people to actually be who they are. You know, now we're saying, well, I'm not racist. Well, I never even considered it. I wrote a blog a couple of months ago about how I don't see racism. I don't see it at the airport. I don't see it in the restaurant. I don't see it walking down the street. I've not seen racism anywhere, perhaps because I'm not looking for it. If you look for it, you'll find it.
Yeah.
So here, buy this valve, folks. Stop looking for it. Look for people. You know, folks is folks. There are no black folks. There are no white folks. There are no African Americans. There are many, many white people that came from Africa who are by definition African Americans. But if you try to wave that flag, somebody will shoot you. They'll shoot. I don't mean they'll shoot you bang. They'll shoot you down. They'll ridicule you. But why is it not true? Yeah. Someone from Africa who is an American, we're not saying what color they are. We're saying they're from Africa. They're an American. Right. I have one in I wrote a script called The Fairway, and I have a gay couple, a black man and a white man. They're both mechanics, and and the white guy is from Africa.
Yeah. And
so in the couple, my Christian friends, of course, love that whole notion, but still, why not? I mean, I love people. Folks is folks, like I said. So in their relationship, they get a kick out of saying, hey, point out the African American in the room. And of course they point to the black guy, and they're wrong because he's from Cleveland. Right. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So folks, if that hasn't just turned your world around, then get a hold of my book and watch some of my movies.
Yeah, absolutely. You got me interested for sure. I think we could do a whole episode on what you said about Obama. I'm a little hesitant to get into that because I know your time is limited. But one thing, I guess I would call it a little bit of pushback is, like, I agree with you as far as not looking for it and that sort of thing. But like, for example, a close buddy of mine, he was telling me the things that he has to think through as a black male that I do not have to think through. Like, for example, getting pulled over by a cop. He's constantly thinking, okay, am I safe? Is the shit gonna hit the fan here, sort of thing. Another guy told me that basically he actually teaches his sons that if you get pulled over, you basically immediately tell the cop, I'm coming from such and such. I'm going to such and such. Here's my license. And I mean, that was so eye-opening for me. I was like, I would never even think to teach my boys that, So do you think part of it would be maybe there's stuff that you and I just don't know because we are white dudes?
I'm sure there is. But I would love to ask your friend the question: Would he feel just as uncomfortable if the cop were black?
Yeah,
and I would think the answer is yes. So that it's not a white on black thing. It's not a race thing. It's a cop on civilian thing. Whenever I get pulled over, I've been pulled over in a long time, but what I do is I either I roll my window down and I put both my hands on the side of the car. I want the gentleman or woman, black, white, or yellow, or red, to see both of my hands. Yeah. I do that. I've always done that.
Right.
So I don't know. I'd heard that before, but I don't know if there really is any truth to that, unless it depends on where you are. You know, right. There are terrible parts of every municipality. And it's not just because people say, well, you know, that's racist because you're obviously talking about the black parts. No, I'm not. There's white trash parts of towns that you wouldn't want to go into either.
Yeah.
There just are. So if you're a man or a woman, black, white, doesn't matter, in a uniform going through that neighborhood, or you just heard that I tell you what, if I was running through, jogging through the black part of town, if there is such a thing anymore, what has Michelle talked about, white flight? I don't believe that's true either. And some white guy had just robbed a liquor store and I was jogging through the neighborhood, chances are I'd be treated the same way.
Gotcha.
I think it's a situational thing. I don't believe that people are nearly as universally well, they are now because of this. That's why I say it's division under the guise of equality. My God, there was a mixed racial couple on the Jeffersons. That was 45 years ago. Have we not come any? You know, there's the proof in the pudding right there. Is I think we were more diverse. We were more less aware of our skin color 45 years ago than we are today. So what direction are we really going?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, I would say a lot of people would be that, but we're also talking barely removed from segregated schools, for instance. But gosh, that's an interesting thought. That really is interesting.
Well, battle. I don't think the battle. I think the battle was fought and won brilliantly with the blood of many, many innocent people. To continue fighting a battle after people have died to win it is doing a disservice to those who died to win it. To be able to make division something that puts money in your pocket, something that puts butts in your seats, something that keeps you on television, I think God does not smile at that.
Now, what about the real racism though that exists? Like, what I mean,
on which side? You're talking about white racist or black racist?
I guess
all
racist?
Of it. Well, I guess all of it. It's going to be human nature. Human nature is there's an us and them. Really, I don't believe that there is a black-white race issue. I don't think color has nearly as much to do with race. I'm sorry, with prejudice as social standing or financial standing do. I do believe there is an untrusting a division between wealthy people and poor people. And what's the old thing they say that everybody has two things they agree on about rich people is they all hate nobody trusts rich people and they all want to be one. But in that is not implied rich white people or rich black people or rich red people or rich yellow people. It's rich people. So I do believe there is a division there. But that's a division that we live in a free country. We're able to we're all able to try to do better. And I think now, especially now, because there's so much opportunity now, a lot of people are trying to do better. We're getting rid of many systems that encourage people to try to either do nothing or do worse so they can get more money.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, totally. We could do this for hours, man,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, so I know your time is limited, and I want to make sure.
But I've sure enjoyed this.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you 3 more questions,
Okay.
and then I'll tell everybody the different things. And like I said, they'll be in the show notes. So, Tyler Perry and Johnny Cash, just a snapshot of what those guys are like,
Isn't
or
that
what Johnny
great?
Cash was like.
You know, I'm going to tell Tyler that I did an interview and he was thrown into the same sentence with Johnny. He will love that. He will love that. Johnny was a delightful.
Hey, tell him how great this podcast was too, and tell Tyler Perry to come on.
I will. Johnny was an amazingly honest, goofy, caring man. Someone who was very much aware of his scars and his faults. And I think very much not aware of his gifts. He would
That's some humility there.
Oh my God, he was amazing. He was amazing.
And you lived with him for how long?
About 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And
was that in the peak of his career?
No, he'd been dropped by the record label, and people forget that. People forget that a lot of people were thrown away before they died, and then they became legends after, which is something else that's, of course, not fair. But I was with Johnny when he was not picked up by his record label, and I was with Waylon when one of them was not picked up and one of them was dropped. I don't remember which one was which, but I was with both of them when it happened. So maybe it was me.
Gosh.
Yeah, maybe it was me. But he took that in stride too. You know, he was Johnny Cash for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Tyler Perry, you know how much I talk about. There's no leisure, and my work is my leisure, and we work hard and love every minute of it. Well, Tyler, I think, would probably pass me by 2 times a day. Not 3, but 2. This is the hardest working person I've ever seen. And he is in such search for excellence in everything that he does. It is an honor. It's an inspiration. I've not been inspired because I've been doing this a long time, and I thought I knew 90% of what I needed to know. And when I started doing the haves and have-nots, I thought, my God, this guy really, really needs to be paid attention to. He is the king of efficiency. And when it all boils down to it, it's about efficiency. When you're filming a movie or a television show, ultimately you're filming a schedule.
Right.
And this guy is amazing. So I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying the friendship. If I have any real trouble, I don't abuse it. But if I need a prayer, I need somebody just to vent to, I can always get him on the phone, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Well, John, one more question.
Okay.
With you have an inspirational album called Recycling Grace, a Southern rock project, Redneck Rebel, illustrious music career. And I was just curious, was there ever any tension or problems during the Dukes of Hazzard days with your music career? Like, was there any ever conflicted interest or people frustrated with where you're spending your time or anything like that?
No, the Dukes, the timing of it worked out really, really well. I would do concerts on the weekends, and my music was just kind of out there for a couple of years when I was with CBS. But then when I moved to MCA, it was the last year of Dukes of Hazzard. So just before Dukes was over for me, my first number one song happened. So it actually there was very little of both of them happening at the same time. So no, I wish I could take credit for that transition, but it was just smooth and wonderful, and took one foot off a number one television show and stepped onto a number one song.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
But I think, that kind of stuff happens when you work so much at it. It doesn't have to. The one thing is for sure, if you don't record a song, you're not going to have a number one record.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got to do it. You've got to do it.
Yep.
Hey, let me throw one other quick thing at you. The CBoD oil, as cute as that is, my wife and I have had a bout over the last 7 months now with cancer. A lot of people hear that word, and people ask me about the CBD oil. And I do not believe that CBD oil is a cure-all or even a cure. But what I've seen firsthand is that there's some properties about CBD oil or CBoD oil that prepare the body. I like to talk about soil and plants. I like to garden. So I believe that CBD oil prepares the body to welcome the medication, to welcome the change in diet, to welcome whatever it is you can do that cancer doesn't like. So while it's not something you take and your cancer goes away, I do believe beyond the shadow of a doubt in our lives here that CBD oil is directly responsible for preparing Alicia's body to accept the medication.
Wow.
So kind of wrap your mind around that, artichoke. And if someone is going through that, get a hold of some CBD oil. If you want to get mine, that's great. I'd love for you to get mine, but get a hold of it.
Who's going to pass up apple pie moonshine?
Yeah, well, we're going with the whole bow thing. And so it has a nice taste to it. Some of them don't. Doesn't mean they're not working.
Some of it's
some of them taste
nasty.
Like you licked a lawnmower blade. But which I don't recommend, by the way. I don't recommend licking a lawnmower blade. But if you are going through that, or if you're going through other health issues, I do believe that it's not just cancer. It's anything where you are currently taking a medication. Obviously, I think diet has a lot to do with it. Obviously, I think exercise has a lot to do with it. But I do believe that CBD oil prepares the earth for the miracle grow.
That's cool.
Okay, because if you just spray a plant with Miracle Grow, you will burn it. You've got to treat the soil as well.
Right.
Okay?
I like it. Yep, and everybody also, this will be in the show notes, but I regret that we weren't able to talk about this, but the Children's Miracle Network that John helped find is just an unbelievable nonprofit.
Yeah, look that up, folks.
You guys check that out.
It's crazy good. 37 years old, over $7 billion raised, and it's been 37 years. So, check it out. You know it. Everybody knows it. I'm sure once you see the logo, you'll go, oh, I put some coins in that little canister. So check it out, and thank you for this. I enjoyed every second of it.
Thank you, John, so much, and just not congratulations, but I just want to humbly say, tip my hat to your life, man. It really is amazing. All the stuff that you did. Seriously. Well, thanks for your time, man.
You got it. You have a wonderful. Hey, everybody, expect good things.